All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. And sometimes, a small group of those players going to battle on any stage, no matter how arcane or remote, can create a remarkable story. 1080 Snowboarding is one of the Nintendo 64's classic games, and a very simple one on the surface. There are only a handful of play modes, and when it comes to time attack, only 6 courses. But one of these courses is notorious for its strategic depth and the story that's taken place within its bounds. This is a story about 3 speedrunners who pushed each other to the limit of what their game would allow, inch by inch, centisecond by centisecond, frame by frame. And through their fierce competition would pursue a long-sought milestone, innovate new strategies, and change the game forever. This is the story of the world record progression of 1080 Snowboarding's Deadly Fall.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
So let's go back to the beginning, the earliest days of 1080 Snowboarding Time Attack. And for that, we need to find the Nintendo 64 high score era in the mid-2000s. A runner by the name of Pat Z claims to have held the world record on Deadly Fall with a 107.45, though this time is disputed by those who know 1080 Snowboarding the best. You see, the game only runs in 30 frames per second at best, and not every decimal place is possible to land on in a time attack record. While 107.45 is possible on Deadly Fall, some of Pat Z's other scores submitted to N64HS were not possible, which makes the rest of his claims dubious. Further so, since at that time, videos were not required for a record to be listed. Is it possible he simply misentered the wrong numbers when submitting scores? Sure. Is it possible the time is a complete fabrication like countless others from that era? Sure. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter, and we can be pretty confident that at least one of these scores in the mid to high 107s is legitimate. Ron Klein had scrolling proof of his 107.61, where you scroll through the records stored on your game cartridge, considered above and beyond proof quality for 2001, and Dutch speedrunners were known to absolutely dominate speedrunning in the early 2000s. Ron would even produce a video of his Crystal Lake record shown in this scrolling proof many years later, giving that much more credibility to his claims, so it is highly likely his 107.61 was legitimate. But 107.45 would remain a sort of grand target for anyone who came later to aim towards. And it would be quite a long while until a challenger could approach this territory. April 2014, in fact. Hayati, a Japanese player, would post a video of 107.45, offering our first glimpse as to what a run of this speed might look like. You see, the game's 5 other time attack courses all follow a pretty straightforward, narrow line down the mountain, with little variation in possible routes through the stage. But Deadly Fall is vast and wide, with an endless number of routes and paths down the course. Since there had been no video footage of a 107.45 to this point, Hayati's run became the new standard for runs to follow in pursuit of the Deadly Fall world record.
Oh, it's a new record!
And not unusual for a quiet speed game like 1080 Snowboarding at the time, it would remain the record for more than 2 years, until another runner, Maulers, apparently decided to throw some kind of party while also doing Deadly Fall record attempts. Maulers used the same route as Hayati and simply executed a better run, enough to save 1 frame and lower the record to 107.41. A beautiful mark and only the second fully proven instance of a world record on Deadly Fall in the game's history. So now's the time to introduce the hero of our story, Bert86, an intrepid speedrunner from the British Isles. Bert's introduction and reintroduction to speedrunning was a common tale among many who grew up on the Nintendo 64. He got the game in the 90s when it was new and played the colors off the cartridge by trying to improve his own records in time attack. Bert was inspired by some of the times he'd seen in N64 magazines, like this one, a 107.88 on Deadly Fall, a plausible record for that era and probably legitimate, though we can't quite say the same for some other times listed on this page. Bert eventually played through the game's life cycle and moved on to GameCube or PS2 like most others did, but decades later, thanks to the wonderful invention of the internet and websites like Twitch TV and YouTube.com, discovered that, unbelievably, some people were still trying to inch down their records in 1080 snowboarding. Bert dusted off his old controller, blew into the cartridge once or twice, turned on the console, and played, until he managed a 107.65. Not bad, but still some work to be done. In Bert's search for videos, strategies, old forum posts, or anything that might help him edge his time down closer to the world record, a mere happenstance, nay, the destiny of Deadly Fall, caused Bert to stumble upon a live stream of 2 brothers, Lomas and Failure, 2 American chaps who had a similar upbringing with the game as Bert, having played it through their younger years, occasionally coming back to the game, but really not playing it too much until the Twitch era of speedrunning. However, this would become a meeting which would irrevocably change the course of 1080 snowboarding forever. You see, Lomas and Failure were also playing Deadly Fall, but they were doing something Bert nor anyone else in 1080 had ever seen before. They were taking a leftmost path down the course, instead of the path that everyone else had been using for the nearly 20-year documented existence of Deadly Fall time attack runs. Instead of the path that even the CPU Ghost uses. This was shocking to Bert, as the brothers were able to get 107.9s with this path, respectable runs by all means. The crazy thing is, they weren't even using the optimal board or rider, whom they hadn't unlocked yet on their cartridge. And they believed that their route, one that they came up with a decade ago, in complete isolation from any outside 1080 snowboarding community, would have the potential to see a time go as far down as the 107.2s. Pretty remarkable, if true. The brothers showed Bert their cartridge ghost of the course. The cartridge only has enough memory to save 1 ghost, and all those years, the brothers saved their left-pathing Deadly Falls ghost just so they could show Bert and the rest of the 1080 speedrunning community decades later. And from there, it was on. Bert lowered his time to 107.51, the brothers got a pair of 107.58s, Failure kept playing and got this run. But of course, Hayati, being the reigning world record holder, getting wind of a new strategy would have to try it out for himself, and ended up with this run.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Hayati believed his run was pretty much perfect, though Bert and the brothers were still pretty convinced something in the 107.2s was possible. Perhaps that drive for lower is why this would become the last record set by Hayati on Deadly Fall. Bert would soon realize that everyone could save 2 to 3 frames on their starts, because everyone had been mistiming the moment you press Z after the start timer counts down. This same day, both Burt and Failer lowered their times to 107.45 and 107.41, likely the biggest pulse in action 1080 snowboarding speedruns had ever seen. And when these bursts of interest happen, usually we are on the precipice of a new era of optimization and greatness. So that brings us to the alcove. You see, a big reason that for years the leftmost route down the mountain wasn't used is because of this extremely difficult point on the course, colloquially dubbed the alcove. It's an extremely sharp left turn made even harder because of a bump in the snow just before the entrance. When you take a bump or mogul and become airborne, you can no longer control the direction of your snowboarder, which makes it very challenging to manage and steer your boarder into the alcove after taking this air. You can see just how hard Hayati slams into the rock wall on his 107.32, but the path is still faster than taking the middle or rightmost paths down the mountain. The newly bolstered competition meant that there was a lot of analysis being done in terms of just exactly how to best enter the alcove and save the most time. Burt had been taking a wide left ground level path towards the alcove, which he used on a new PB of 107.38, but eventually realized that the way Hayati and the brothers were dropping off this ledge just before the alcove gave a better line of entry. Really driven home when he saw Failer get a 107.35 using the ledge jump only hours after his own PB. There's also this set of trees about 10 seconds after the alcove. Burt would stay on the right edge of the tree line, whereas the brothers would weave through the left lane. It turns out Burt's method was slightly more optimal. Using all this knowledge, Burt managed to put a run together, getting his first world record on Deadly Fall.
Oh, it's a new record.
So now's the time to talk about some of the game's mechanics. Remarkably, the game emulates real snowboarding very well. Each pixel of snow wants to pull you either to the left or right, so it takes really good knowledge of the game and a lot of experience to know exactly how to navigate your way down the course. It's always tough in a video like this to grasp just how challenging getting a clean run can be when all you're seeing are successful record runs. But for instance, if you get a little bit too far to the left in the alcove, it'll pull you right into the leftmost wall, losing a lot of time. Another mechanic is that you go slower in the air than when you're sliding on the snow. So generally, you want to minimize airtime as much as possible to get the fastest run. This might even include doing something like a small jump over the top of a bump or mogul to avoid getting launched even higher in the air from such an obstacle. The game has tons of moguls and bumps and ramps, so this is something that can almost always be optimized a little more. Another airtime mechanic involves your balance when you're in the air. You see, if you pull too far back on the controls, you will land with too much weight on your back leg, causing you to have what's been dubbed a stutter landing, losing enough time to end your run. And a very common place to get a stutter landing is at the absolute last second of a Deadly Fall run. So if that wasn't foreshadowing enough, here's Failer on a remarkable run just hours after Burt's 107.28. The run looks to be 107.25 pace, maybe lower, a would-be new world record by one frame. But then...
What the f***?
Mamma mia!
Man? God damn it! Sean, look!
Not to be outdone, Burt followed up this disaster with a 107.20s pace run of his own, with a very clean alcove portion. But hey, speedrunning can be pretty hard after all. Both men would shake it off and continue undeterred, and I'll let Lomas take it from here.
Oh my god.
Alright guys, Failer has done it.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Failer has done it.
Holy sh**.
Holy smokes, and that run wasn't perfect at all.
No, I not at all.
You'll probably notice that we're only seeing an in-game replay with a cinematic camera view for this run. You see, Failer and Lomas were still pretty new to speedrunning at the time, as you might be able to tell. I haven't even commented on the webcammed quality proof videos yet, and so they weren't always recording all the time, rather relying on the in-game replay as proof. Given the small relative size of the 1080 speedrunning community at the time, and the freshness of any sort of serious competition, it wasn't seen as a huge deal yet. But the awkward camera angles made it impossible for Bert to determine something very important, that Failer had used some sort of small time save upon entering the alcove. Failer's brother, though, of course knew exactly what this time saver was, and used it to get a 107.25 of his own.
Failer, come out to play! Woo! Oh my goodness.
3 weeks later, Lomas would lower this to 107.22, tying his brother for first place, in what Bert himself would describe as a poetic moment for the pair, given that they were the ones who originally discovered the left side alcove route more than a decade earlier. However, this poetic moment was extremely short-lived, about an hour long in fact, since Failer would immediately pick up the controller and lower the record by 1 frame to 107.18. The video, though, is again shoddily filmed and only showing the replay of the run, making it very tough for Bert to decipher what exactly the brothers had been doing to their advantage.
Alright, it's recording.
Hell yeah, boys! What's that, we in the teens? Hey boys, we legal!
And tensions would continue to heighten over the next 2 weeks, with Bert becoming the overall champion in 1080 snowboarding and battling with Hayati for the world record on many of the other courses. Failer would reveal he had achieved a 107.15, a time Bert thought was roughly the theoretical max for Deadly Fall. So either Failer had achieved the perfect run, or was hiding something, hoarding some secret knowledge. And like they'd done previously, they only produced the cinematic replay as proof, not a full capture of the actual run, which could be used to analyze and examine to understand where exactly they were saving all this time. At this point, the 1080 speedrunning community decided it was time to only allow records which had full video capture. A wise decision, and one which would set the stage for the next game-changing series of events and their drama to unfold. Bert would continue grinding through June and eventually get a 107.22. While still a couple frames off world record, he noticed his Ghost Rider was a frame or two ahead at the start of the run, and he could envision the 107.15, which is maybe the most important step in pursuing a speedrun record. But then, as if just to tease Bert, Lomas would, that same day, reveal he had tied his brother's 107.15, submitting only this photograph as evidence, meaning the world record would not be officially ranked on the leaderboards. Bert knew he had to dig deep and try to examine where he could possibly save a couple more frames. It was unlikely, after all, that both brothers had absolutely frame-perfect runs down the course, and through a week of grinding, Bert did find something at the very end of the stage. You recall Failer's stutter ending from earlier, right? And you recall the general principle that the less time in the air, the faster you go? Well, it turns out that, let's say you're just about to hit some kind of bump that launches you into a decent amount of airtime, but you do a small jump right before the bump, landing into the crest of the bump, you won't get bounced around as high. So you're getting some small airtime to avoid some bigger airtime, thus saving time. This works very well with the 2 bumps at the end of Deadly Fall, and also prevents you from getting the stutter ending, potentially ruining your run. Bert used this to nail a 107.18, just a frame away from the brothers' record and retaking the glory atop Deadly Fall. This neat little innovation and creep towards the brothers' territory awoke Failer from somewhat of a slumber. The following day, Failer posted these ominous lines of text in the 1080 Snowboarding Discord. "You all seem to have forgotten something, so let me remind you. Bert and Lomas Lumen are pretenders, desperately trying to achieve the greatness I come to naturally. Deadly Fall will always be my course, my strat, my life. And posted this screenshot, apparent evidence of a new record. Bert's irritation was growing that the brothers seemed intent on hiding their runs and strategies from the community, a small group of players who just wanted to enjoy competing at their old favorite game, and a group who never had problems sharing videos, ideas, and strategies until these two strange brothers with seemingly lost, forbidden knowledge from decades ago came into this small corner of the world. But perhaps the brothers would soon be met with a bit of divine justice. On June 25th, a 1080 Avalanche runner, rcanon86, let it slip in Discord that the brothers were targeting 107.02, a time that, with Bert's current knowledge, should have been impossible. This meant that, without a doubt, the brothers were hoarding something big, something substantial enough to save numerous frames. And with that, Bert set out on his journey to search every corner of Deadly Fall, analyze every frame, examine every inch of powder, until he could find exactly where the brothers were saving another full 1/10 of a second. And after extreme scientific tier analysis, Bert would look back to the alcove, where he realized he could implement a similar jump over the mound to minimize airtime strategy that he had used on the course's final 2 bumps. At this point, just at the entry to the alcove. This seemed to save 3 frames, or exactly 0.1 seconds on Deadly Fall. And so after a long grind session, Bert would improve his 107.18 a number of times to 107.15, 107.12, 107.08, a new world record. But he wouldn't post the video. Instead, Bert decided to play into the brothers' game and only posted a screenshot of the end screen to the 1080 Discord. Lomas would later describe his reaction. I still remember waking up at my girlfriend's place to seeing that Bert had hit the 107.08. I woke up, immediately texted Failer what happened. The girlfriend could tell I was disappointed in something by how I reacted. We were definitely deflated, but it's all part of the competition, and that's what makes 1080 and speedrunning so fun. And I think that sums up the priorities of a true speedrunner in a nutshell. You know, not getting breakfast or coffee or enjoying a nice morning with the girlfriend, but the harsh desire to get back to your CRT as quickly as possible, to fend off your greatest competitor from taking any more precious world records from you, or from taking them to a place where you'll never have a chance to get them back. And with that, the race for 106 was truly on. Just to put it in perspective, the world record had been in the 107s since the days of legendary 1080 snowboarding icon Ron Klein and the records he set in 2001. 107.61 from the earliest days of Nintendo 64, a time you could have pretty much got when unboxing the game on Christmas morning back in the 90s. And now, we were on the cusp of really entering the new era of 1080 snowboarding time attacks. A couple days later, Bert would get a 107.05, having to fight for every single frame of time save, and feeling pretty good given that the brothers were still a few frames behind with 107.12 and 107.15. But he would wake up on the 1st of July to some shocking news. A joint effort between Lomas Lumen and Failer began late 2017 to beat, nay destroy, the 1080 snowboarding competition on their favorite course, Deadly Fall. What lay before them was a record held and considered unbeatable, 107.41. However, Failer and Lomas were no ordinary speedrunners. They were innovators, pure thinkers, and changed the route from the status quo to what is now known as the Failer-Lomas-Lumen Deadly Fall route. After further tweaking, we have re-established ourselves as the kings of Deadly Fall. Bear witness to greatness. We are sharing our strategy, having done what we believe is enough to cement ourselves in Deadly Fall history. Let it be known here who is responsible for the most optimized and competitive route in 1080 snowboarding. And the brothers dropped their 107.02s. They were happy to have cut a full 0.1 seconds each, using the general jump early to avoid hitting a bump or mogul and getting even more airtime technique on a few more locations throughout the course. But I can't help but think it might have been a bit of a premature celebration, perhaps. As the story goes, Lomas and Failer would play with 2 CRT televisions side by side, grinding for hours, motivating each other to go lower and lower, and sharing knowledge, strategies, and ideas with one another. Around 11 p.m., several hours into a deep session that night, Lomas was on a run. Failer yells after having messed up his own run on the other TV.
God damn it! I pressed the wrong C button at the end!
Lomas would play through the chaos and get this speedrun.
I got 2. Oh my god. Nice job.
Woo!
I'm taking a picture. Is that cool? Yeah, that's fine. And let's write on there. And I'll even stop for right now because I wanna analyze the routes, man.
Lomas then left for work on the graveyard shift, and Failer literally played Deadly Fall all through the night, to the point when Lomas returned from work after 8 a.m., Failer was still playing. That is a classic speedrun session if I've ever heard of one. No more than an hour later, just before 9 a.m., Failer would too hit the 107.02.
Post this. Post this. Post this. Woo! That's a terrible tune, by the way.
The brothers once again sharing the crown atop Deadly Fall. They knew they had to keep going and get 106. Bert knew they would keep going and get 106. But after a 12-hour marathon gaming session, the brothers needed some well-earned rest and half a day's worth of shut-eye. This meant that the window had been left open just a crack, just enough for Bert to have one final shot at it. This is how Bert describes that day in his own words. Although I was slightly surprised and disappointed to see that my world record was gone, I was pleased to see that the brothers had only beaten my time by finding new ways to go quicker on the route. For me, this meant that there was only more time to save, and I got back on the grind again later that night. After some practice, I began to learn the new techniques and eventually landed at 107.02 myself, but I was struggling to find that extra frame I needed. I knew that if I didn't get the 106 that night, then either Lomas or Failer would get there first. I took a break for a while and just chilled out, but I couldn't get it out of my head that I had to get that run. I went back to my N64 and turned it on, and within 5 minutes of starting to play, I had an unbelievable run on my hands. The start was reasonably good, but the alcove was just incredible. It was the kind of alcove you might get once in a couple of hundred attempts. I just barely touched the wall. No wall hit alcoves are incredibly rare and are what you aim for on this critical part of the course. As I switched my Ghost back on after exiting the alcove, I could see that I was at least one frame ahead and my heart rate immediately picked up. When you get into these situations, your fight or flight response kicks in and you can feel the adrenaline rush through your body. Your hands get sweaty and it becomes all about mental self-control. In that moment, you can either choke the run or take a deep breath and just go for it. This time, there was absolutely no way this opportunity was getting away from me. I made it through the trees pretty cleanly, landed the pillars, and all that was left was to get the timing on the 2 jump cancels right. And with that, Bert changed speedrunning history. For the first time since record keeping began, the Deadly Fall record stood at not a 107, but a 106. After 20 long years, after countless hours grinded, failed runs, and a fateful encounter with two brothers who shared otherworldly knowledge that only they had, Deadly Fall stood at 106.99, a truly remarkable speedrun. And despite any differences or animosity between the speedrunners, they could all stand together knowing that this accomplishment, without the sum of all working together, would not have happened. But that's not quite the end of the story. I'll spare too many details here, perhaps better saved for another time, but about 2 weeks later, Lomas would get his own 106.99.
There we go. Yes.
Bert would follow this up in mid-August with a 106.95, and that would stand as the world record to this very moment. The 1080 runners would mostly begin optimizing the other courses, but very recently, on February 25, Failer and Lomas finally matched Bert's 106.95, the three standing united atop the Deadly Fall leaderboard. And perhaps that is the most fitting way for this saga to end, for now. Based on every optimization currently known and the amount of time won or lost compared to their best runs ever, it's believed something in the 106.8s is possible and could be something to keep an eye on over the next little while. It's kind of crazy to think that pretty much the entire sequence of events in this story all took place over about half a year in 2018. Bert got a decent personal record in January, discovered the brothers and their strategy around that time, and by July, their rivalry had pushed each other to accomplish absolute greatness. I often see comments along the lines of, I really want to start speedrunning, but I just don't know where to begin, what game to play, or if I can ever compete with those who have been playing much longer. And if you're one of those people, I hope if there's one thing you take away from this video, it's that you can. When Lomas and Failer were playing around with an old favorite game, getting 108s and high 107s with the strategy they came up with in isolation years ago, could they ever have imagined that only months later, they'd be racing the reigning champion of the game to become the first speedrunners to get a 106 on Deadly Fall? And now, thanks to the entire Deadly Fall saga, the competition on all 6 courses has blossomed with world record improvements on every course since. I want to give a big thanks to Lomas for bringing this story to my attention, and to Bert for pretty much writing up this entire story in a speedrun.com post, and to all the 1080 speedrunners for entrusting me as the arbiter of this story. It seems like a really cool speed game, not too complex to pick up with only 6 courses. So if you're thinking for the 100th time about learning how to speedrun a favorite game from your days gone by, just do it, mate. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you might enjoy some of my other deep dives into the world record progression and history of some other stages throughout speedrunning. And hey, if your speed game has a cool story like this one, reach out to me and let me know. It was a lot of fun exploring a game I didn't know much about before going into. So thanks for watching, stay true, and I'll see you in the next stream or video.